All right. Hello and welcome. Students, this is our Affordability of International Study workshop as part of International University Month. I am so glad to see a bunch of students here, and I am really happy to introduce our two speakers. We have Lea-Anne from Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, and Amy Easton from University of Stirling in Scotland, which I have visited and is amazing. We were supposed to have someone from Ireland and she wasn't able to join us, but we're going to cover everything. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. And any questions that you guys have, please don't be shy, and feel free also to pop your name into the chat and introduce yourself and say where you're interested in and what grade level and what you're interested in studying, because that affects the cost sometimes as well, whatever program you're interested in. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Amy and Lea-Anne. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Amy, I think, will share her screen. So while we have that up and going, my name's Lea-Anne, and I represent Macquarie University, which is in Sydney, Australia. I'm based in Los Angeles and have been out here for about 5 years. As you may guess from my accent, I am Australian. I originally worked on campus and I did my Master of International Relations at Macquarie. And throughout my bachelor's and my master's, I actually studied in 5 countries. So I try and tell students to beat me and make it 6 or 7, because it's amazing how many opportunities are out there for you. I'll have Amy introduce herself as well, but this is just going to be super informal. We'll just sort of talk about what you need to consider in terms of like studying overseas and the affordability of it. It personally blows my mind, the cost of education here in the US. It is astounding how many zeros are often on offer letters here. So hopefully this is sort of a nice reflection for you guys to sort of work out if this is a good financial option for you guys too.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Easton and I'm from the University of Stirling. You might notice as I go on, I am not from Scotland, but I am currently based in Stirling. I'm actually originally from Riverside, California, so not too far from LA. And I moved over right out of high school and did my undergraduate degree in animal biology at Stirling. And then I stayed and did a master's in environmental management. And I loved it so much, I have stayed on to work to support students coming over and applying to Stirling, but also working with the other Scottish universities, really to promote Scotland, because it is such an amazing country. But yeah, just when it comes to affordability, it's definitely something that was a big consideration for me. Looking at the local UCs, looking at the UK was definitely a more affordable option for me. So with that, we will launch into our presentation. So affordability of international study. Hopefully you'll realize through this that it isn't as scary as you might think. I know travel in general seems like it can be very expensive, but in reality, when you're there to study, to live there, it can be a very affordable option for you, and sometimes a cheaper option for you as well, depending on where you're looking to go and what you're looking to do. So why study international? Well, we've got a lot of great places around the world. Most campuses being safe, friendly and welcoming. You can go through some of the statistics of the university that you're looking at, and you'll see a lot of them will quote the safest Stirling, that's a Stirling one, like Stirling is one of the safest campuses in the UK, but generally in the UK, all of our campuses are safe, friendly and welcoming. And if we had our rep here from Limerick as well, they would say the same, that the UK in general is very safe. Me personally, I've also traveled to Australia, and I can also vouch as someone traveling by themselves, also very friendly, welcoming country. So there are a lot of great options out there. We're all globally connected, and that means we can have a really multi-variety. I know, again, personally, when I was looking at schools in Northern California that maybe have been a 12-hour drive away. And as I started looking more and more, I realized 12 hours on a flight can get me pretty much to half of the world. And it really opened up my kind of search of what's going to be the best fit for me, what was the right fit, and what I wanted to study. And that's really what led me to Stirling. 12 hours on a plane, I was in London, and then from there it's just a short hop to anywhere in Europe really, including Scotland. Generally, a lot of courses around the world are taught in English, which means language won't be a barrier for study. And then you can pick up other language classes along the way. But again, most classes, most universities, English will be a main language there. If you're looking for a little bit of a change of scenery, you can definitely find that with some of the most beautiful countries in the world. Scotland being one of them. I think it was Lonely Planet's most beautiful country a few years ago. But again, no matter what you're looking for, if you're looking for a beach town, if you're looking for, you know, rolling hills, if you're looking for some snow, you can find that at kind of a lot of universities. And also being well connected, again, you can get all of those experiences a short journey away usually. The other thing that's really important is that's a lot of kind of experience of what you're going to have at a university overseas, but actually the degrees can be internationally recognized, and most things will transfer back to the US. It also has an advantage of sometimes you have the ability to study something sooner than you might do in the US. Examples being like law or science-based degrees. You actually start that from day one. Medicine as well, dentistry, veterinary studies. You actually do that right out of high school in your first year. You can start studying those. They won't necessarily transfer back like for like, but it usually can take some top up of different tests or maybe a few extra classes that you need to take when you come back. But overall, your study time can be a lot less, which is definitely an advantage when you're thinking of time and money going into your studies for the end goal. So something to consider there as well. But I would say we definitely have a robust student life. There's something it's for everyone really, and the student union and clubs and societies are a really big part of studying at international schools. And so there's usually a club for anything that you're interested in, and same with sports teams. If there's something that we don't have, usually you're able to start it if you have enough friends interested in it. And there's definitely some unique things. I know I definitely joined netball, which is a very British sport. And I know like I had a friend that used to work at the University of New South Wales, and they definitely got into spike ball, something we do not have in the UK. So lots of new things to try that you might not necessarily have that experience if you do stay in the US. So with that, I will pass you on, because what we're here to talk about is really how much does it cost to study here?
I think while thinking about the benefits of studying overseas, it's worth considering that we go to university to then get a good job. And that's obviously something you need to consider when you're choosing your universities, which is going to be the best option to sort of put you in the right career path. I had a student that graduated from my university with a Bachelor of Arts, and he came back to the US and interviewed with Moody Analytics in New York. And he said had to do 5 interviews throughout the entire process. And he said at least 30 to 40% of every stage was just about his experience in Australia. And the maturity and the independence that he got from that experience was obviously, he was able to reflect that really well in the interview. He got the job and then the promotion. I think that's something really important to consider when you're thinking not only about the affordability of things, but what university and what experience is going to get you the job that you want in the future. Because obviously, when you think about the career, that's obviously going to reflect back to the return of investment of your degree. So certainly keep that in mind as well, and the experiences you're going to have. So with that, how much does it all cost? There's obviously so much to consider here, and if you're going to a university in Los Angeles, is going to be a very different cost to if you're going to a school in Omaha, Nebraska, for example. And those sorts of theories apply when you're going overseas. Studying in London is going to be very different to studying in the countryside of Scotland or right in the middle of Sydney, compared to somewhere central in Europe as well. So living costs obviously have a big sort of different determinant to that as well. And I think mostly here today we're going to talk about big public schools overseas, but you've also need to consider like the American universities abroad. They have a different cost associated with them as well, because they're more of a traditional US school. So I think Franklin University in Switzerland has a sticker price of about $60,000 compared to the American University of Rome, which has a sticker price of about $20,000. So there can be some really big substantial differences, but we'll generally talk about the public universities abroad in English-speaking countries here. So with that, a majority of degrees outside of the United States are actually 3 years in duration. It's only the United States, Canada, Scotland, and Malaysia that have 4-year degrees. So that's something you consider as well when looking at going overseas. Obviously, when you're looking at the annual tuition rate, you're timesing that by 3 or 4 can have a substantial difference at the end of it. There's about 200 schools outside of the US that accept the US financial aid, and that's very clear on the Department of Education's website. We could probably link that in the comments in a second, but that's a great place to start when you're looking at universities and trying to determine if the department has essentially given permission for these schools to take the financial aid. And that pretty much means that those schools are interested in having American students because they've gone through the process of being able to accept the loans and certainly working with students to make sure that it's a legitimate university as well. So definitely worth checking out that list as you start your college search. You can also work when studying in the majority of countries overseas. In Australia, you're able to work up to 20 hours per week during semester and full-time in non-teaching weeks. And minimum wage is about $20 an hour. And you're not limited to just working on campus. You can really work anywhere that you would like to. And we don't tip in Australia. So if you're working at a cafe on a Saturday night, for example, you could be looking at about $25 to $30 an hour. I know some of my friends when we were at college were able to get up to $50 an hour working in some hospitality jobs. So it certainly can be quite lucrative. Amy, do you know what it is in Scotland or the UK, in England?
Yeah, so in the UK, it's you're able to work the same amount, so it's still like 20 hours a week during your studies and full time in the summer. It does vary, I would say, depending on where you're looking in the UK. Some councils have taken what they call a living wage approach, where you could be earning like £10 an hour, because that's what they say is the minimum wage to like survive and have a comfortable life. And other places will still have like a lower minimum wage of like £5 an hour. Stirling is definitely a council living wage. So like if you're a student ambassador and you're giving campus tours or like work in a cafe, you should expect to have like £10 an hour. And we also don't really tip. So most of the money is going straight to your pocket, and then anything you get extra is always a perk. It might, cover your bus costs to get to and from your shift. But overall, like you're getting a decent wage for whatever work you're doing.
Definitely. And of course, internships and industry experiences are built into a lot of university degrees around the world. In Australia, if you are doing an internship for credit, you can't be paid for that. But at the same time, it's an awesome opportunity to start networking and then sort of create those ties so you can ask for a job at the end of the internship. Do you know, Amy, if students in Scotland can be paid for internships?
Yeah, it depends kind of what company you're working for. Some of our internships will maybe cover in kind. So it might be a place where you're doing like a residency one. So they might cover your kind of accommodation costs or transportation costs to help out with that. And then some companies will pay you for it. And some will have unpaid internships. So it's really kind of a mixed bag of what's on offer and what's, again, the right opportunity for you.
Do you want to just go on to the next slide? I think it'll sort of help to explain the different tuition rates and what you need to consider and general cost of attendance. So here is a pretty helpful slide. We've put some of the popular colleges in California compared to our schools. So as a UCLA student paying in-state fees, you're looking at about $13,000 just for tuition. Which can be quite affordable compared to our universities. Obviously, Chapman is quite that outlier there. And then you sort of break it down with the board and the personal money that you would need while studying overseas. Of course, books and supplies. They are substantially more affordable overseas, and I would say that's predominantly because a lot of your I guess materials that you'll need for your classes are all online these days. So it would be very rare at my university you actually have to buy books because the academics are able to give you the academic journals each week for your semester and for each of the different classes. So I'd say it's probably the same with Stirling, considering that it's very affordable there in terms of books and supplies. I think one of the biggest differences is that outside of the US, we don't have the intellectual property laws that they have here in the US, and hence why the academics can send students the readings for each week, and why they're substantially more expensive here in the US. Transportation's obviously a big one. It doesn't look like we have sort of taken into consideration flights going back and forth. But when we sort of tell students the general cost of attendance from Macquarie, we sort of ballpark around $40,000, and that does include a flight back and forth to Sydney once a year, which is around $1,000 to $1,500 US return from Sydney to LA. And I say it's pretty much the same going to London as well. There's so many different airlines flying from LAX around the world that you can certainly get a good deal. They're flying on a daily basis as well, which is great. I think one of the biggest things to consider here is obviously as well UCLA and Cal Poly and Chapman are the 4-year degrees. Compared to Macquarie and Limerick, we are the 3-year degree program. For Stirling, is that your 4-year price?
That's our 4-year price, yes. One thing to note as well, I think you mentioned it maybe earlier, is that depending on your degree, it can cost more. So a medical degree is going to be a lot more expensive than what you would see there for Stirling's tuition.
Yeah, that's definitely the same for Macquarie as well. I think for each of our programs outside of the US, you apply to a degree program as opposed to the US where you're applying to the university. And each degree program does often have a different price point associated with it. Often STEM classes are a little more expensive than liberal arts courses, but on average, this is sort of a good average between each of the different programs that the universities offer. So again, looking at these final numbers, it isn't that expensive to study overseas. The Chapman number there freaks me out. And of course, these are all totals without scholarships or financial aid. They're the sticker price for each of the institutions. But that also means that the international schools listed here would be more affordable when taken into consideration financial aid and scholarships as well, which are often merit-based. International schools very rarely look at need-based scholarships for students. And same with the application process, it's very much academic based. So that's a big difference as well. Anything to add here, Amy?
No, I think that's everything. The only thing I would add is that the prices can absolutely be a little less or a little more depending on your lifestyle as well. So it is a rough guide. And if you want to have, the fancy new super expensive accommodation, that will obviously raise your price. Or if you wanted to, rent your own studio apartment, that's also going to be more pricey. If you wanted to share and have a little bit more affordable accommodation, that's usually also available in every university city. So it's something to keep in mind that this isn't an exact science that we've produced. It's usually a genuinely a solid good guide of what you can expect to pay, but it will adjust according to your lifestyle.
That's a really good point. If you're going to be having Starbucks every day, that's obviously going to make it more expensive than having coffee at home. I think with that, in Australian universities, and I think it's also for the UK, correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have the meal plans as we would have in the United States. So at Macquarie, meal plans are associated with your accommodation provider. So you may choose to have a meal plan, you might not. So that obviously changes as well, what you will be spending on that kind of thing. Is that the same with you guys?
Yeah. Yeah. It is the same in the UK, yeah, absolutely. But I will say Australia definitely has the best coffee. So if you're going to save and spend money on coffee in Australia, it's worth it.
It's a very good point. Fun fact for everyone, Starbucks lasted about 6 months in Australia and they went broke and had to close their Australian operations. So I think they went from about 300 stores down to 4, which is just in the very touristy areas of Australia now. So Australians take their coffee very seriously. So you might want to budget some more money in Australia. The other thing I guess to consider as well is traveling. If you're in Australia, you're very close to Southeast Asia and New Zealand, Bali, Thailand. There's so many incredible places to explore from Australia. And same, obviously, with being in the UK, you've got Paris on your doorstep that you can go to for a weekend, or spend a long weekend in Portugal or Greece, or even head down to Morocco. When I studied in Europe, that's what I love to do. So, of course, you need to take into consideration all the adventures you could go on as well. when sort of thinking about how much you're going to need to put towards your education. But that is also the benefit of being able to study in each of the countries, work in each of the countries. You can save your pocket money towards those sorts of things if you want to. Cool. So this again is just a small global comparison of different universities around the world. UBC up north of us in Vancouver is again a 4-year degree, so that's $38,000 per year. Vancouver is a little more expensive, but of course you guys are all in the Bay Area, so you know what expensive is living there. And I think coming from one of the most expensive cities or states in the world, it probably makes it a little easier to look at prices everywhere else because you sort of got a higher ballpark to begin with. Glasgow is a 4-year degree as well at 36,000. Macquarie, of course, is the 3-year degree, and Limerick is a 3-year degree as well. So it just sort of shows the international degrees are somewhat similar together in pricings at the big public schools. And then you've got to take into consideration sort of the area. Sydney's obviously a big cosmopolitan city. And am I right in saying that Stirling would not exactly fit into that? Calibrate's more of a smaller country town.
Yeah, it's more of a suburban environment, so it makes it really affordable. But like Stirling's great because it's 35 minutes from Glasgow on the train and 45 minutes from Edinburgh, so you can go to the big cities and experience them as much as you want, but you're not paying for like the big city costs for living there. But Scotland is small, so you can get everywhere really.
And Australia is about the same geographical size as the United States. So you certainly can explore, but it would take you quite a while and you need to get on a few different planes to get there. And obviously Sydney is a big city. So our prices are a little more expensive, but we also have a very high living standard, and that's why our minimum wages are so high as well. So yeah, it can be evened out essentially. What's next?
Yeah, so we are talking about how easy it is to travel and get around at the moment, but that is definitely a little bit more limited at the moment due to the current global pandemic. As you can tell, we're actually doing a Zoom instead of meeting you face to face like we would normally be doing this time of year. But I would say that all of our universities are still open. We're still supporting students, and we're making sure that we have safety precautions in place to make sure that students and their staff can have a safe place to provide education and also for living. So you're never going to be alone when you're coming over. There's going to be staff there supporting and prepared to support you during these unusual times. And we're really being flexible. I know at Stirling and all our other partner universities that we have in Scotland are very much taking the approach of if you'd like to come, like you're welcome to come, but if you need to start in line and make sure that you're coming when it's safe and you're able to come over, we're also allowing kind of flexible arrival times on campus. Is that the same for you guys, Lea-Anne?
So in Australia, it's a little different. Australia's done a pretty phenomenal job of suppressing the virus, that we have had 2 very distinct waves, and now there is very, very little community transmission in Australia. It's averaging about 20 new cases every day, which is pretty phenomenal. So Australia's borders are currently closed to non-Australian citizens. So any of our international students that have commenced online with us this past semester, they were asked to start online until it's safe to transition to Australia. And we're certainly hoping that in the next couple of weeks and months, we're going to have clarity on when students can come to Australia. But if there's any seniors here starting with us in the July intake next year, certainly hope the world is going to be a lot more open and you'll be able to start in person in Australia then.
Yeah. And the other thing to consider is healthcare with that. So in the UK, we do have free healthcare. If you're coming over with your student visa, you will be asked to pay what is called a health surcharge. It is pretty affordable. It's about £350 per year. So that should be about I think it's about roughly $400 a year at the moment for each year that you study with us. And once you've paid that, you can register with the NHS, and anything you need from like a doctor's appointment to a prescription to emergency surgery. Hopefully no one needs that, but if there's an appendix that needs taken out, It's all free once you've paid that surcharge. So it's essentially like your health insurance for when you're here, but it's $400 a year, which like still I can't believe as an American citizen that came over that essentially was free to me. It is slightly different in England, like you do have to pay for prescriptions, but it's still very, very affordable. So it's something to take into consideration that if you do come over and you aren't feeling well, you will definitely have access to that healthcare, and you won't have to worry about kind of, do you have enough cash to go to the doctor because you've just arrived? It would be taken care of here in the UK. I believe it's pretty much the same in like Canada. I think the same in Australia.
Yeah, so students need to get overseas healthcare insurance when they accept their place in a program at an Australian university, and that's dictated by the Australian government. It's about $1,500 to $2,000 for the full duration of the program, and it essentially starts from the minute you get on the plane until you return 3 or 4 years later, and it's exactly the same because we have universal healthcare. Any sort of reason you would have to go to a doctor for prescriptions or for that appendix would mean it's covered by our insurance as well. That's a really great point. That is a very big financial benefit of studying overseas for US students.
Yeah, definitely. And this is not so much money related, but something to be aware of just on the topic of healthcare is that if you have any healthcare things in place now, you should always get in touch with the university or like the doctors that the university recommends working with, because usually we can make sure that we have a smooth transition if you do have any healthcare needs, so that you're not having to worry about that when you come, especially with like every country having their own response. You might need to quarantine when you arrive. You might not need to quarantine depending on where you're going when you are able to travel. So if you are like needing to have a doctor's appointment soon, or so you can avoid one before you have to quarantine, we can work with you to make sure you get in touch with the people that you need to make sure you have that smooth transition for moving over in terms of healthcare.
The other thing as well is post-study work visas. So in Australia, you're able to stay in work for 2 years after graduation. And the graduate salary in Australia is about $58,000. So a lot of our US students have sort of chosen to stay and work for a couple of years and start paying back student loans. So that can be a really great option as well if you want to get some professional experience before coming home.
Yeah, that's the same in the UK as well. Yeah, we've just started a 2-year post-study work visa. We don't have all of the details yet because it's something we had and then changed probably in 2012, but it's now being kind of brought back to be the 2 years. So we're not quite sure how much that visa will cost in addition to your student visa, but that's definitely an option. One thing to also consider when you are looking at what you're going to do after and if you're going to stay and work, the UK definitely has smaller wages when you look at it on paper, but the living expenses is so affordable. Like if I'm back in California, I think bread is always like $5 for a loaf of bread. And here I'd be shocked to pay like £1. It's like 98 pence for a loaf of bread. So things are definitely more affordable here in terms of like your kind of weekly food shop that you're doing. If you wanted to go to Five Guys, on the other hand, it's definitely going to be more expensive to eat out here. But I find that like my kind of living wage and lifestyle here is definitely like balances out for like what on paper is a lower wage. So something to consider is like that whole picture of what benefits do you get for what you're doing afterwards. So with that, I think we can move on to questions. So if anyone has a question, if you wanted to just gonna take the chat off. I think we've got a text box, if that's right. We do, yeah, we have a chat. So if you wanted to type them in a chat, you're absolutely welcome to type your questions in and we can answer them. Or if there's a different model that you'd like to use, Daphne, we can also do that.
That all sounds great. Thank you both. That was super informative. That was great.
Awesome.
Always learn more new stuff. So students, don't be shy. I'm sure that if there's something you're wondering about, probably somebody else is too. So there are no bad questions. This is new for everyone. Anyone?
Did we do such a good job? We've answered all your questions.
Maybe that's it. Oh, we got one. Okay, we got one. All right. Are the costs different for students who have EU citizenship? I guess maybe in Ireland. Excellent question.
Yeah, so at the moment in the UK, it depends where you're going. So in Scotland, if you're considered an EU student, you actually have free tuition fees, but it depends on why you've been living in the US. So if you've been living in the US because you were like born here and your parents work here and you've just lived here and just happen to be a dual citizen, in that case, you'd still be classed as international. But if your parents have a job that have brought you over for like a certain reason, potentially you would be eligible for free tuition fees. So it's worth asking a university in the in Scotland that you're applying to, or in Ireland, to get a fee status form, so you can fill out the complete information about your family's history, and then they can make a decision if you would be classed as an EU applicant or an international applicant that happens to be an EU passport holder. Otherwise, it just means you don't have the costs of your visa, your health insurance, and any limits to work. Those would be removed to you. Also can mean that you don't need to pay a tuition fee deposit. So we usually ask for about £2,000. It's kind of a general guide to kind of secure your place for the university, and that kickstarts the visa process to make sure you are really a legitimate student coming to us. We have that kind of tuition deposit that would be waived if you're an EU citizen.
And I think that in Canada, hopefully I'm not misspeaking, but my understanding is that Canadian citizens, dual citizens, also have a lower tuition. And if you are a French citizen and you're trying to study in Quebec, I believe there are also benefits there. So those would be specific questions for Canadian reps, but I believe that's the case. So I think in general, there's often some amount of benefit. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's pretty significant. So those would be questions to ask for wherever you guys are interested in studying.
Definitely.
Anyone else? Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, this was a great session. Thank you again, Amy and Lea-Anne, and thank you to the students for coming, especially on your day off of class. So this session is recorded, and we'll post it on the counseling website. You can let me know if you have any questions or reach out to either Amy or Lea-Anne. Actually, if you want to pop your email addresses into the chat box, that would be super. And students, we still have like 2 solid weeks of sessions for International University Month. So please check the schedule on Naviance or on the College Career Center website. And you can sign up for other sessions as well. That we've got like a lot of country specific things. We have Australia tomorrow. So Lea-Anne's going to be part of that. And you'll hear from a few different Australian universities. That's tomorrow at 9. And then we have Scotland on the 27th. And we also have England, Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland. We had Canada this morning. So there's a lot of info still coming. So we hope that you guys join us for more sessions. All right.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.